What is going on, guys? Welcome to the Reformed Reader, the channel where we review different forms of media through the lens of a Christian who is under the authority of the scriptures. My name is Josh, and today we are going to be doing a book review of Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. Now, before we jump into the review, let's go over what is this book about. An astonishing technique for recovering and cloning dinosaur DNA has been discovered. Now, humankind's most thrilling fantasies have come true. Creatures extinct for eons roam Jurassic Park with their awesome presence and profound mystery, and all the world can visit them for a price. That is, until something goes wrong. All right, guys, so I know it's been a little bit since I've been back. Thank you guys for being patient with me. I've had a lot going on. Real life sometimes does occur, and sometimes you get sick, sometimes you get poison ivy on your face, and you don't look too good for the camera. So to save you guys some grief and me down in the comment section, I figured it'd be best just to wait. But I did read Jurassic Park and finished it up last week, so I do want to review it. Now, for those of you who are new to the channel, the way that I normally break down my review is I go over the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good being the things about the book that I enjoyed, the bad being the things about the book that I didn't care so much for, and these are preferential things. But then I go into the ugly, which is what could be some sin that is steeped into this work that might hold a Christian back from picking it up. And I rate this on a scale of 1 to 10. So without any further ado, let's go over the good. What are some things about this book that I enjoyed? Well, it's Jurassic Park. Now, the movie adaptation is one of my favorite movies of all time. So I thought, why keep putting it off? It's time to read the book. It's time to see if the book is actually always better than the movie. And in a nutshell, I don't think that it is. But let's talk about the things that I enjoyed about this book. Quite a bit. This is a very good read. If you don't know anything going into it, it's probably way better than for those of us that grew up with the movie. But what I mean by that is the things about the book that I really enjoyed, apart from the movie, and you're going to hear me make that comparison a lot today, things like that the raptors weren't really the villain in this story like they were in the movie. You definitely see, they still are, but you definitely see that the Tyrannosaurus is equally villainous as the raptors. You see the Tyrannosaurus pop up far more frequently than you do in the movies. In the movies, you got the one really big scene, and then obviously at the end, but throughout the book, the Tyrannosaurus is pursuing our main characters throughout the entire story. And so I did really enjoy that because there's a couple scenes in here that are not included in the movie that I thoroughly enjoyed. And actually, some of them were included in some of the later movies. For instance, this book starts off the opening scene, for the most part, I think it's chapter maybe 1, 2, or 3, is the opening scene of the Lost World movie, where the little girl gets attacked by those little dinosaurs, and they start trying to bite her and things like that. That's how this story kind of opens up, is that things have already gotten out of hand. I did enjoy that was in there. Also, the pterodactyl scene in Jurassic Park 3, which I know not many people loved, that is in this book with a couple of little tweaks, but obviously they can't fit this whole book into a movie. And I'm glad they didn't for a few reasons. Still talking about the good, the characters. I also love that we learned a lot about Dr. Grant and Dr. Sattler's relationship, because in the movie, they made Dr. Sattler a love interest of Dr. Grant. But in the book, Dr. Sattler is much younger than Dr. Grant, and Dr. Grant is actually a widower. And Dr. Sattler is his understudy. She is his protege, so to speak. And so it's more of a student-teacher relationship rather than a romantic one. Again, I understand why they did it for the adaptation, but I did like that that was quite a bit different. I also liked that in this book, Dr. Grant is far more lovable. Steven Spielberg has talked about this quite a bit, where he has said that in the book, he loves that Dr. Grant loves kids. He loves that he loves kids. He loves spending time with them. He's immediately drawn to the two children in the story, into protecting them and those kinds of things. And so Spielberg said, I would love to see more of a character arc with Dr. Grant. And the way he did that is that he initially made Dr. Grant kind of averse to the children, and then over that time he spent with them, developed a more fatherly type relationship with them and protected them and kept them safe and made them a priority. Whereas at the beginning of the film, clearly he is not a fan of children. And I think he even goes on to say that he doesn't want to have children. And we learned that that's not the case with the Dr. Grant of the novel. So that's part of it. Another thing that I like is Dr. Malcolm. Now, let me just go ahead and tell you that Dr. Malcolm in the films portrayed by Jeff Goldblum, I think is a far superior version of Dr. Malcolm than the one you get here. But I do see why they had Dr. Malcolm do certain things and behave in certain manners in the book and in the movie. So again, I liked the differences really more than anything. I like the differences between the novel and the movie. Some of the little nuanced things, like just the way the characters spoke to each other. But the waterfall scene and the river scene, for those of you that have read the book, that's such a cool scene. And I'm kind of sad they left it out of here. Also, we have a much broader cast because in the film they had to kind of combine some roles in order for the story to flow a little more fluidly. But like one of the things I really liked about this story is that the park is nowhere near complete, at least not in comparison to the way the movie depicted it. Whereas the movie, the resort is almost complete. It's ready for guests, and this was sort of their trial run. Whereas in the book, they're nowhere near completion. They're still scaffolding up, even in their bedrooms. I mean, they're working out the kinks, and you can see from the get-go that those kinks tend to persist, and for every solution they find to a problem, they find 3 or 4 more new problems in the book. So I did really like that. But overall, the characters, the pacing is really good in this book. You don't really have a lot of downtime. It's pretty fast paced. It's not a very long book. This is actually the first 2 books combined in one volume. So if that gives you any kind of reference of how long the book actually is, I think it's only maybe 300 pages. It's not very long. But the pacing is excellent. And then also moving around from character to character, learning more about those characters and what drives them was excellent. So now let's go over the bad. What were some things about this book that I didn't enjoy? And if I'm just being upfront, it doesn't have the same magic that the movie has. Now, what I mean by that is there's the scene of Jurassic Park where everybody gets off the helicopter and they're being led to the resort and they see the brontosauruses or the brachiosaurus. And you have that scene where their faces are just filled with wonder. And you can see Dr. Grant, who has such a mathematical and logistic type mind, all of a sudden, just with one sighting, completely revert back to the child that loves dinosaurs, to that inner child, that sense of wonder and mystery and magic. You see that in his face in an instant, and you do with Dr. Sattler and even Dr. Malcolm, all of them. It's just that sense of awe and magic. And you don't really get that here. You get doctors that think analytically. And so they break everything down analytically. You kind of lose that sense of wonder. And I love that the movie is able to kind of mesh those two things together so well. And I definitely think that's a Spielberg thing. It very well could be Michael Crichton writing the screenplay, but I know they worked closely together. But what I mean is, so you start out with that sense of terror in the opening scene of the movie, and then immediately it jumps to that sense of wonder where Dr. Grant is digging up the bones and those kinds of things. And then you jump forward to where they see the dinosaurs, but then they're thrown into peril. But then even in the midst of them facing this perilous situation where, they're up in the tree and they're hiding from the Tyrannosaur where Dr. Grant and the children are, then they wake up and they see the Brontosaurus's head poke through the trees, and you have that sense of wonder again. And so that sense of dread and peril, but then immense joy and elation has these peaks and valleys that flows through the whole movie. And so you'll be thrown into a sense of peril, and then immediately you'll be thrown into a sense of wonder. And sometimes he just has the two collide, and you don't really know how to process it, because you're like, I know I'm supposed to be terrified, but this is also, they're supposed to be so enamored with what's going on around them. And you just lose that in the book, I think. I think the book is much more analytical. This is much more of a science fiction novel than it is that piece of cinema where you see all of that kind of wrapped up with and then tied with a beautiful bow. I definitely have some issues with the book as far as preferential things. There were just some little things that I thought were kind of unnecessary that were sprinkled in there. Nothing inclusive or anything like that. It's not my preference. For instance, John Hammond is insufferable in this book. In the movie you have sort of the jolly grandfather that loves his grandkids, but he just has this misguided, misplaced faith in the work around them. He seems sort of naive. He's just like, yeah, everything's just great. Everything's going to work out great. Everything's working great. And then things just continue to spiral out of hand. And then finally, when Dr. Sattler basically grabs a hold of him and says, wake up, that's when he comes to the realization that this is terrible and we have to save the children. In this book, the children are only here. They're only brought to the island so that way he can show his investors that this is still investable, that it's profitable. And it is so debased. It is so just sleazy. And that's what John Hammond is in this book. He is a giant sleazebag. Now, again, in the film, you still get that lovable man that he just has that sense of awe and wonder with the dinosaurs, and he wants to share that love with other people. And you even see him argue against, in the film, the people that said, we can charge whatever we want. That's him. He's in the book saying, no, we can just rob people blind. This is going to make so much money. And that's all he's concerned with. So I really, really didn't like that. I detested John Hammond in this book. So I will say that's a big negative for me. So this leads me into the ugly, which is, what are some things that could be steeped into this work that might hold a Christian back from picking it up, starting with violence and brutality. So for violence and brutality, I gave this a 6. It's about what you would expect. If you've seen the movie and you're fine with the level of violence and brutality that's in the movie, that's what you're going to get with the book. It might be a little more extreme at times, but I would also argue that it's also far less extreme than the movie at times. And so I would say they kind of balance each other out. So I'd put it at about a 6. I'd say, for violence and brutality, maybe like a PG to PG-13 type rating. Nothing that I think is going to hold somebody back. There's a couple parts that are kind of icky, but nothing that excessive. Okay, so category 2 is going to be sexually explicit content, and this is a big fat 0. So yeah, this is just not in here. There's no mention of any type of sexually explicit content. There's no need for it. Michael Crichton sought out to write a good science fiction novel about dinosaurs, and he did that. And that would have just been completely unnecessary. So yeah, it's not in here. So category 3 is going to be language. Now, language does include blasphemy. And so for language, I'm going to give this a flat 5 because there's several uses of blasphemy in here. I don't think any of the real heavy hitters. So again, the language, if you've seen the movie, it's pretty much what you can expect here. I think there might be a few more uses of some of the more explicit words, but really it kind of falls in line with the film. So if the film kind of hits that threshold for you and it was a little extreme, this may be a little too extreme for you, but I would definitely say it's probably on par with the film. Okay, so the fourth category is going to be gratuitous inclusions. And for gratuitous inclusions, again, I'm going to give this a 0. It's just not in here. There's no need. It would have been completely unnecessary. Also, this was written in the late 80s. So those types of things weren't as common, thankfully. And I may have to go back to some of the books that were written at that time. But yeah, it's not in here. So for gratuitous inclusions, it's another 0. And so this leads me to the final category, which is dark themes. Now for dark themes, I'm also going to give this a 5. Again, nothing extreme, nothing excessive. It's on par with the movie. It's on par with the movie as far as the dark themes go. This book is a little more depraved, I would say. It's a little more grim than the film. Like I said, you don't really have that sense of wonder and joy and awe. It's really more of, look at this horrible place that you've built and it's killing people. That's sort of the feeling that you get while you're reading this. And that never really lets up. You aren't really able to take that breath like Spielberg gives you in the film. So because of that, yeah, there's some killings here. There's some other things that I would say are kind of heavy themes, nothing spiritual in nature. So if that's what you're worried about, it's not in here. Again, it falls in line with the film. So I would put it at about a 5. So for the heavy themes, I'd say, it's kind of a 5. Again, it's sort of the PG to PG-13 range. So the final question is, would I recommend this to a Christian? And the answer is, yeah, I would. I didn't see anything in here that would hold a Christian back from reading it, in my personal opinion. Now, with all that being said, I want to kind of wrap this video up by saying, guys, if you love the movie, if you absolutely love the movie and you think it's one of those movies that's almost a perfect movie like me, and you're worried that you're going to like the story less, or that you're going to just be constantly comparing it to the film and you're going to say, it just may not live up to the film. And so because of that, it kind of gives me pause to put it off a little while. If I'm being just completely straight with you guys, I would say, yeah, just watch the movie. The movie's so much better, in my opinion. I think the movie is a 10 out of 10 movie. To me, there's very few flaws there. There's some preferential things that I would obviously prefer to be a little bit different, but really overall, it's almost a perfect movie. It's one of those movies that I can always go back to and always enjoy. And this just sort of missed the mark. That's kind of what it seemed like. This seemed like the less refined version of the same story. And it's because it is. Because when Spielberg read this book and he was like, this has to be made into a film, what he did is he gave Michael Crichton the opportunity to make revisions to his work after it was published. And I think Michael Crichton took him up on that opportunity. So I know it was him, Spielberg, and I think Kathleen Kennedy. Think what you will of her, but she did help write an excellent story. And so I think Michael Crichton, when he was given that opportunity and had other people's feedback about, yeah, I really like these things about the book, but this didn't work so well. And why don't we kind of, why don't we make the grandpa a little more likable? Why don't we make it, Alan Grant a little less likable at first? So that way, when you see how likable he is, deep down, you love his character that much more, and he's not just one note. And why don't we make Dr. Malcolm quippy and snarky and erratic? I loved all of the changes that were made. And so I will say this seemed like the beta version of the story, and what we get in the film adaptation is the final product. You also just get to see the dinosaurs when you're watching it, and it's condensed into an hour and a half, and so the pacing is tightened up quite a bit. So I would say personally, if you guys are on the fence about maybe I should read this, maybe I shouldn't, I still enjoyed it. I want to get that across. I put it as a 4-star read on Goodreads. I still really liked it, but it's because the story is so good, and I also appreciate what it gave us. But is this a 5-star read? By no means, in comparison to the movie, which I would say is a 5-star movie. So overall, I enjoyed the book, but I think the movie is better. So thank you guys so much for coming and hanging out with me and listening to me ramble about Jurassic Park for a little bit. Guys, if you read this, let me know what you thought down in the comment section below. If you have any question whatsoever, please don't hesitate to ask. I will get back to you immediately, normally by the end of the day. So if you have any questions or concerns or whatever, or just a comment, leave me one down. I loved getting to talk to you guys. So again, guys, thank you so much for supporting me. Thank you so much for supporting this channel. Please, 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 if you don't do anything else, please share these videos with your Christian brothers and sisters, because it is my goal for this channel to be a good resource for my brothers and sisters in Christ, so that maybe we can spend our time, money, and energy a little more wisely on things that honor the Lord. So again, thank you guys so much for coming and hanging out with me, and I will see you on the next one.